The river moved quietly beside the village, reflecting the golden colors of the evening sky. Small wooden houses stood along the shore, and smoke rose gently from clay kilns as potters finished their work before nightfall. The air smelled of wet earth, firewood, and baked clay. In one small workshop near the edge of the village, a young man worked furiously at a spinning wheel. His name was Darrow. He was 23 years old, strong, ambitious, and impatient. His hands moved quickly as he shaped clay into pots, one after another, fast, sharp, efficient. He believed speed was power. He believed hard work meant never slowing down. Around him were shelves filled with unfinished pots. Some leaned sideways, some were drying unevenly, others already showed tiny cracks. But Darrow ignored them. "I don't have time to wait," he muttered. Outside the workshop, his father stood silently watching him. The old man's hands were rough from years of shaping clay. His back had grown slightly bent with age, but his eyes were calm and wild. He stepped inside slowly. "You're pressing too hard," he said softly. Darrow sighed without looking up. "If I slow down, I'll never sell enough." His father picked up one of the damp pots and gently touched its side. "The clay is still weak," he said. "It needs time." Darrow stopped the wheel suddenly. "Everything needs time," he snapped. "That's all I ever hear." The old man placed the pot back carefully. "Because it's true." Darrow shook his head. "No, people are faster now. Traders move quickly. Markets change quickly. If I wait, someone else wins." His father smiled faintly. "Then let them win quickly." Darrow frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means fast success often breaks the fastest." But Darrow was too frustrated to listen. That night, he worked until midnight, baking pot after pot in the kiln behind the workshop. The fire glowed bright orange in the darkness, while sweat rolled down his face. He imagined the future. Crowded markets, coins in his pocket, people praising his talent. He imagined leaving the village one day and becoming known across distant towns. Finally exhausted, he fell asleep beside the kiln. The next morning, he rushed outside excitedly and opened the heavy kiln door. For a moment, he froze. Cracks everywhere. Some pots had split completely. Others had collapsed inward. A few had exploded from trapped moisture. His breathing slowed. No. He picked one up carefully, but it crumbled in his hands. His father appeared quietly behind him. The fire only revealed what was already weak. Darrow clenched his fists. "I worked harder than anyone." "Yes," his father said calmly, "but not wiser." Darrow stormed away angrily. For days he barely spoke to anyone. The villagers whispered about his failed work. Children laughed when they passed his workshop. "There goes the fast potter," one boy joked. Darrow hated hearing it, but deep inside, something hurt more than embarrassment. It was confusion. He truly believed effort alone should bring success. So why did everything keep falling apart? One afternoon, while walking through the village market, he noticed a crowd gathered around a small table. His father stood behind it. Only 4 pots sat on display. Simple, smooth, perfectly balanced. A merchant lifted one carefully. "This is excellent work," the merchant said. "How long did it take?" The old man smiled. "As long as it needed." The merchant nodded with respect and paid generously for all 4 pots. Darrow watched silently from across the street. His father had worked slower than him, made fewer pots than him. Yet people valued his work more. That realization stayed in Darrow's mind all night. Later, unable to sleep, he returned to the workshop alone. Moonlight entered through the small windows. Broken pots still covered the floor. He sat quietly among them. For the first time in years, he stopped rushing, stopped working, stopped forcing. He simply sat in silence. His eyes moved slowly across the cracked clay pieces around him. Then he whispered softly, "Maybe I'm the one breaking everything." The room felt strangely peaceful. After a long while, Darrow stood up. He walked to the clay table and placed a fresh lump of earth on the wheel. But this time, he didn't rush. His hands moved slowly, carefully. He felt the clay instead of fighting it. He shaped one single pot, only one. When it was finished, he placed it gently on the shelf and walked away. The next morning, he returned to check it, still damp. Before, he would have baked it immediately. Now he waited. The day after that, he adjusted the rim slightly, then waited again. For the first time in his life, patience felt uncomfortable. Every hour made him anxious. Part of him wanted to speed things up, but another part remembered the broken pots scattered across the floor. So he stayed patient. Days later, he finally baked the pot, carefully, slowly. When it cooled, he lifted it into the sunlight. No cracks, no weakness, just strength. A strange feeling filled his chest. Not excitement, not pride, peace. Weeks passed. Darrow changed little by little. He woke early every morning, but no longer rushed through his work. He focused fully on each piece. Some days he completed only one pot, sometimes none. The villagers noticed. One old woman visited his workshop and smiled. "You work differently now." Darrow nodded. "I finally realized the clay was never my enemy." "And what was?" "My impatience." The woman laughed softly. "That's an enemy many people never defeat." Months passed. The harvest festival approached once again, the largest event of the year. Merchants traveled from nearby towns. Musicians filled the streets. Craftsmen prepared their best work. Last year, Darrow had entered the festival desperate to prove himself. This year felt different. He no longer cared about being the fastest or the most famous. He simply wanted to bring honest work. The night before the festival, he carefully wrapped his finished pots in cloth and placed them into a wooden cart. His father watched quietly. "You're nervous," the old man said. "A little." "Why?" Darrow thought for a moment. "Because this time, the work means something to me." His father smiled. "That's why it will mean something to others too." The next morning, the village square overflowed with life. Colorful banners waved in the wind. Children laughed and danced through the streets. The smell of roasted bread and firewood filled the air. Darrow slowly arranged his pottery beside his father's stand. People immediately noticed the difference. The pots were smooth, balanced, strong. Each one carried quiet beauty. A merchant picked one up and tapped its side gently. A clean, ringing sound echoed. "Excellent craftsmanship," the merchant said. "Who made these?" "I did," Darrow replied. The merchant looked surprised. "You're the young man whose pots used to crack?" Darrow smiled slightly. "Yes." "What changed?" Darrow looked down at the clay for a moment before answering. "I stopped trying to force time." More people gathered around. Some admired the details. Others asked questions. One little boy stared curiously. "Why don't your pots break anymore?" Darrow knelt beside him. "Because I learned something important." "What?" "The strongest things grow slowly." By sunset, judges moved through the festival, examining each craftsman's work. When they reached Darrow's table, they paused longer than expected. One judge lifted a pot carefully. "This feels balanced," he said. Another examined the smooth edges. "No weakness." The oldest judge looked directly at Darrow. "How long did these take to make?" Darrow answered honestly. "Longer than I wanted." The old judge smiled. "Good things usually do." That evening, as lanterns lit the square, the mayor climbed onto the wooden stage. The crowd slowly became silent. "This year's award," the mayor announced, "goes to the craftsman who showed not only skill, but discipline, patience, and respect for the craft." He turned toward Darrow. The crowd erupted into applause. Darrow stood frozen. For a moment, he could hardly breathe, not because he won, but because he finally understood. All those months of slowing down, waiting, learning, had changed more than his pottery. They had changed him. His father stepped beside him and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You see now," he whispered. Darrow nodded slowly. "Yes." The mayor handed him a silver coin engraved with the symbol of the village. The crowd continued clapping, but Darrow barely heard them. His mind was quiet, peaceful, complete. That night, after the festival ended, Darrow walked home beside his father under the glow of lantern light. The cart behind them rolled softly over the dirt road. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Darrow finally said, "I used to think patience meant waiting and doing nothing." His father looked at him. "And now?" Darrow smiled faintly. "No, I think patience means continuing to work while accepting that some things cannot be rushed." His father nodded proudly. "Then you've learned what most people spend their entire lives missing." Years passed. Darrow's workshop slowly became famous across nearby villages. Travelers came to buy his pottery. Young apprentices came to learn from him. But what impressed people most was not his skill. It was his calmness. No matter how busy life became, Darrow never rushed again. One day, a young student asked him, "How do I become successful quickly?" Darrow smiled softly and handed him a lump of clay. "First," he said, "stop asking quickly." The boy looked confused. Darrow continued, "A tree grows slowly before it becomes strong enough to survive storms. Clay dries slowly before it becomes strong enough for fire. People are the same." The student listened carefully. Darrow looked toward the river outside the workshop. The water moved steadily, never rushing, yet always reaching its destination. Then he said quietly, "Patience is not weakness, it is trust mixed with discipline. It is the courage to continue even when results are invisible." The boy nodded slowly, and Darrow smiled, because once upon a time, he had needed to learn the exact same lesson himself.